Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the second webinar for our pre-course Thrive program. This session, we're going to focus for a few moments on setting goals. We're going to touch on the end about the value of measuring how we spend our time as well. So let's get straight into it for the day. I'm not sure if you've come across this this image before, or a similar image. This is a process or a phenomenon called ikigai. I'm pretty confident that's how it's pronounced, and it reflects a community in Southeast Asia where the most content and longest living culture of humans exist. So a really amazing area to research, where people really have brought together the things that they're good at, the things that they love, the things that the world needs, and the things that they have the opportunity to be paid for. So that phenomenon is something that I believe we can all learn from. There's lots of times in our life that we have to do things that we're potentially good at that we don't love, or there's things that we're good at that we can't be paid for. But sometimes we have the opportunity where we can get a few of these circles to overlap. And sometimes in life, it's a matter of our profession using a couple of our meeting a couple of our needs in that respect, and then maybe a hobby meeting the others. So consider the things, again, things that the world needs, things we love, things that we have a skill at or we're good at, and also things that we can be paid for, knowing that financial security or freedom can be important to some. So the first question we would ask ourselves in this instance is, why do we set goals? The importance of setting goals is to understand that they actually provide long-term vision, but also short-term motivation. They really are that principal tool to ensure we meet our full potential. To understand, having goals will give us the opportunity to understand the habits that we need to establish that will lead to the reaching of those goals. And sometimes, in many cases, it's a matter of the habits that need to be stopped, or the things that we actually need to change on a daily basis to ensure that we're meeting those goals. What goal setting does do is it allows us to focus on what skills or knowledge we'd like to acquire. So understanding where we'd like to be, we can think about the type of person, both from a hard and soft skill set perspective, and make sure that we can work towards acquiring those skills. With relevance to the content that we're going to look at in the Thrive workshop around time management, having a goal will give us the opportunity to understand and organise where we spend our time, and allow us to do that in a more focused fashion. The other thing, and I think this is important for those who are self-employed, is that concept around accountability. Who is it that's holding you accountable? If you're employed by someone else, there might be a manager that you check in with periodically. But if we're self-employed, yes, as long as we're meeting the requirements of, say, business partners and maybe a bank manager or an accountant, and the figures at the end of a certain period of time, a month or a quarter, look okay, typically that's enough to hold us accountable. But is it ensuring that we're actually doing the best we can with the resources available to us and the time available to us too? There's some reasons why we might think about setting some goals. One of the most important things is to ensure that the goals we set are right. We need to ensure that goals resonate with you and they're not actually imposed by society. What do I mean by that? I'm sure you'll be able to reminisce with me around years where you set maybe a New Year's resolution, and if you had a bit of a joke, might have been over at Bubbles at a New Year's Eve function, and everyone was sort of setting the same goals, but no one really had any intention of keeping them. That's because typically those goals that we set, usually at that time, are imposed by society. Not necessarily things that resonate with you. Don't get me wrong, there's something about the turning of the calendar year that gives us an opportunity to have a look and reflect and plan. And we are going to talk in Workshop 1 about the value of effectively planning our year. But making sure whatever we do plan that that they're very much in line with our values and the things that are important to us, and not things that we think we should be doing. The other question there is understanding what we would sacrifice to meet them. So do you have a fallback position? Is it an option? In Australia, I think there's a culture around having a fallback position to make sure we don't end up disappointing ourselves or those around us. I'll give you an example. You're looking to start a new business, but you're not going to quit your job. So you do it as a bit of a sideline. But the next step to really say, for example, get rid of that job so you don't have an option to make that business a success is often not there. So what we do is we make sure we sort of inherently build fallback positions into our goals. Another example it might be, oh, look, I'd love to go overseas in June, but if I don't make it till December, that's okay. Well, I promise you're not going to get there till December, because leaving that optionality in our goals will give us the out to not take the actions and make those steps that we need to do to meet that deadline. We're going to talk a bit more about that too in terms of timeframes as well. The other thing, I'll make the comment again around what habits need to change, and we'll talk about soft and hard skills in a minute. So if we were to think about setting a goal, yes, it's essential to set a goal. But if you think about an Olympic sportsman, they don't necessarily set a goal. The goal is often set for them. So if you think about a 100-metre sprinter, the world record, which is a very finite number that is set for them, that's the goal. What they actually set is a strategy. So they set the steps that need to be taken to meet that goal, which is what we're going to talk about now for a couple of minutes. First and foremost, and I think my mug is over some of the text here, but it's really important if we've got a goal to make sure we know how we're on track. If anyone's been involved in project management, they would have heard of the concept of milestones. So making sure we have indicators along the way that make sure we know that we're on track to meet that goal. So say, for example, you want a $50,000 house deposit by the end of the year. What does that look like in June? What does that look like in March? But also, what are we doing today to make sure we're headed towards on the right track? And then we don't get to the end of the year and go, oh, geez, I thought that I was here and never really made it. Making sure we have an opportunity to track success. Is it on a piece of paper? Is it reporting into a mentor? Is it a spreadsheet? What is it that we can do to really genuinely track that success? The other question there is around contingencies. While I suggested that optionality in a goal and a fallback position is not necessarily that smart, if we make sure our goal is realistic from the outset, we won't necessarily need a contingency, but also knowing that, look, this is where I'd like to be, but this is some of the resources I would mount along the way, or some of the tweaks I'd make as required. I'm going to talk about timeframes in a minute. If we are going to develop that strategy that I mentioned, there's a few things that we need to consider, and these are some of the things I'm going to talk about now. One of the first things to consider if you're setting a goal is what resources are actually required to do that. So are they financially viable? Is it realistic at the time in your career, your life, your family, or your business to mount the resources that you require to meet that goal? What about physical resources? Is it bricks and mortar? Is it physical strength and fitness? What is it that are the physical and tangible resources that you need to acquire or have available to you to meet those goals? And are they realistic? We'll talk again about time in a second, and also skills. When we think resources, there's a number of things we need to look at, and we're also going to talk about relationships as well. By way of time frames for goals, there's a few things that we can have a look at here. It is essential that a goal is time bound. We've always, majority of us do spend our time in what we call the urgent and important category, which we'll talk about in workshop 1. But where things that really are pressing, we consider them to be important and they have a deadline. I don't know about you, but if something doesn't have a deadline, chances are it gets shuffled to the bottom of the list. So is there a definite deadline or time frame around this goal? But also, is it realistic? We always are quite optimistic in this space. Look, I'm doing a course, it'll take me 2 years, but I'll crack it out in 1. Chances are, if we have a longer time frame available to us, again as a fallback, we will actually assume and use that time. Do you have the time? If you're training for an Ironman and you're going to swim, what is it, however many kilometres, and ride 160 odd and run a full marathon, do you have the time available to you to train at this point, again, in your family, your career, your community endeavours, and your life in general? So do you have the time to dedicate to that goal? Similarly, we all have ambitions to study, but does that fit time-wise in your life? And we'll talk about that when we get into managing our time as well. The concept of buying time, we use it quite loosely. I wish I could buy some time. I actually believe it's a really realistic option for a lot of us, where we can, we know there are other people with a skill set different to ours, where we can actually ask them to do something for us, and where we stick with the skill set we've got and actually use the cash we develop out of that to buy some time. And again, that feeds into that concept of outsourcing. Is there something that you can do either in line with your goal, but also in the rest of your life, that can be outsourced to buy yourself some time? We're going to have a really good conversation around that concept of delegation and buying time in the first workshop, so stay tuned there. The next thing in this space is that concept around relationships. Networking is a big part of the Thrive program, and day 2 of the workshop will start off with a really good discussion around networking. But in your business, your life, your family, where is it? What relationships do you currently have? And also, are there any relationships that need to be fine-tuned, honed, or established to make sure your goals are met? Are your goals at odds with anyone else in your business life or family? Is there anyone who is going to be inhibitive to reaching these goals? And the question, if the answer to that is yes, why? Why is it? Is it around a communication issue? Is it that the goal is misaligned to your values? Is it not appropriate? Is the timing not right? Are the resources or finances not available? Also, in this respect, there's an opportunity to have a look at some of the relationships and networks that could be joined and developed to make sure that you end up with the skills and support you need to reach those goals. The other thing that's important to be mindful of is that goal in line with the agenda of your organisation? Is it might be a conflict of interest with something else that you're working on, or it might be that you're spreading yourself too thin by being involved. And also, and I respectfully say the word permission, like, is it that you've got buy-in from the people who you either report to or who you I guess coexist with in your business or your life, that they are supportive and won't be undermining your ability to reach those goals? We've all been in a situation where someone sort of snuffed off our goals, and it can be really debilitating. The other thing is, when you're setting those goals, is there anyone you need to confer with? We are going to have a look at some goals in business, and I'll be interested to have a conversation in the workshop. Was there anyone else that you spoke to when you were setting those goals? The piece around having the skills, in this respect, it's important that we're mindful of both soft and hard skills. We're going to do some exercises throughout the workshop to really demonstrate that while we would be confident if we practiced hard skills, such as it might be photography, it could be touch typing, welding, whatever it might be, we're all confident that we can dedicate the time and improve those skills. But what I do encourage you to have a think about is what soft skills that you could develop, hone or acquire. And in my opinion, I've made a business out of helping people develop their soft skills, because I really believe, just like a hard skill, a soft skill such as communication, persistence, management of yourself and your time, development of relationships, they're really things that can be developed or honed. The other thing that those skills undermine is our habits. So if you are a perpetual, say, procrastinator, that is something that you can actually stop doing. Sometimes what it requires us to do is drop the label. So I'll give you a bit of an example. We'll, again, talk about this in the workshop. But if we label ourselves as being a certain way, it might be that we're bad with people's names. It might be that we're the one that's always late. It might be I'm a really cracking procrastinator. In the instance we do label ourselves with these titles, what it does is it gives us permission to actually behave in that way. So if you're the one that's always late, chances are you look at your watch and think, they know I'm going to be late, I might as well wait here for another 10 and get this done. So I can promise you, labelling ourselves gives us the opportunity to live up to that behaviour. And look, if you're happy with the label and you're happy to own it and wear it, no dramas. But if it's something you don't particularly like, sometimes labelling ourselves in such a way really just prevents us from applying ourselves to changing those habits or skills. We are going to talk through the workshop around some of the skills, both hard and soft, we'd like to develop to make a better contribution or a more significant or efficient contribution to our communities and businesses and lives throughout the Thrive program, and talk about a bit of a personal development plan at the end. The other thing with acquiring skills and also where we're positioning ourselves from a goals and a professional perspective, it's really important that we have a think about the level of challenge of the tasks that are in front of us and the skills level that we have. If you look along that bottom axis, we're looking at skills level from low to high, and on the vertical axis, we've got challenge level of the task. Where we'd like to be is we'd like to find ourselves up in this session where my arrow is there, this process or period of flow where you're really you have a high skill level, but it's matched with a high challenge level in the task. And what that'll mean is that our cognitive I guess application is at its highest. In the instance we have a really high skill level in a lowly challenging task, we'll find ourselves either bored or too relaxed and can be complacent. Or the flip side of that is if we find ourselves constantly being challenged in an area where we don't have any skills, we can end up here, which is a dangerous space around anxiety. So, what is it that the skills you need to acquire to reach your goals, and where would it see you on that flow diagram? Just quickly as well, important when we're looking at acquiring skills, and we are going to touch on this stuff again, but there's some questions in your pre-course workbook about this stuff around how you best like to learn. The reason this is important is with the way we do business these days, we have all of these opportunities of learning right at our fingertips through podcasts and internet searching and YouTube video clips. And if you have a think about how it is that you do like to learn, you can actually make sure you choose the way that best resonates with you. I'm not a bad auditory learner, so I quite like listening. A really short concentration span, which is a label that I'm working on ditching. But I don't mind a good podcast, and we will talk about some of those in the workshop. I'm not necessarily a great reader. I find myself getting bored. Love a good picture, image, video. So and also those who really like to learn hands-on. So that if you show me how to do it, but before you leave, can I have a bit of a go? That's that kind of set learning style. So have a read of those boxes there, and have a think about whether you're a visual learner, whether you're someone who prefers to read and write, a listener, or more a hands-on learner. This will give us the best opportunity to work out, if we're going to acquire some skills, how to go about it. We're nearly at the end of our session today. I'm going to quickly touch on our pre-course work before I talk around managing your time. There are some exercises in the pre-course work around mapping some goals. I don't doubt that some of you will find this process tedious and potentially even frustrating, but thank you for sticking with us. If you have a look at that pre-course workbook, there's an opportunity to complete a 5-year plan template. The reason this is important is because we definitely need some longer term goals, but then we also need to make sure we're breaking them down into shorter term goals, but also daily actions. What is it that you need to do today, tomorrow, and the next day, and every day going forward to make sure we're on track? Touch base with us if you have any dramas with that exercise. Have a talk to the other people in your life about what some of those things could look like, because some of them are maybe their business and professional, but also some personal things in there too. So reach out either to us if you've got a drama, or to the other people and get some input. Have a read of it and then potentially think on it for a few days. You'd be surprised how your subconscious ticks away without you realising on that stuff. So if at first nothing comes to you, set it aside for a couple of days and have a think about it. I just want to make a couple of comments around managing your time, because there's another exercise in your pre-course workbook that we'd love you to look at before you come along to the workshop. If you are a last-minute person, I'm giving you a bit of a heads up that this exercise cannot be done the night before. So what we are asking you to do is have a look at how you spend your time. The reason this is so critically important is because we cannot manage what we cannot measure. I'm sure those in business are writing budgets to manage their finances. If you are health conscious, you would be tracking your steps or your diet. You might be doing a food map. We cannot manage what we can't measure. That is a line that I remember from being involved in an old water use efficiency project in the cotton industry 15 years ago, and it's resonated with me ever since. The reality reality of our time is we have a very finite 168 hours available to us every week. So in terms of finding time, buying time, we only have flexibility within that limit. And what we're going to talk about is firstly understanding really where you're spending that time, so then we can start looking at where some real efficiency gains can be made. There's a little question in there around how you could map your time. The answer to the question is there. You could do it in a hard copy, print out a piece of paper. You could do it in a spreadsheet in Excel, but there's also some apps available for you to manage time as well. The other thing to note, we have done this exercise with almost 300 people, and the common question I get is, I couldn't find a week. And I think that's a really steady reminder that most of us, if we went into our lives to look for an ideal week, they don't exist. So I won't do it this week because I've got family visiting. I won't do it that next week because I'm going to Brisbane for work. I won't do it the week after because I'm away on Friday and I wouldn't normally be, or I've got to go and I've got some appointments. At the end of the day, most of us are in a situation where our lives aren't groundhog days or weeks, so we don't do the same thing every day. So waiting to choose the perfect week to get this done won't actually serve you very well. The other thing to be mindful of is similarly when you're tracking steps or writing in a food diary or having to write down for the accountant every single thing you spend, we're usually a bit more mindful. So be mindful when you get to the end of that week where you have mapped your 168 hours that it's possibly going to be one of the more efficient and productive time management weeks you've had because you've been on notice. So I also say at this point that I have people that come into the workshop after having done this exercise and wish they had done it a little bit more diligently. The reason I say this in advance is because we're going to do a lot of work exercises and have lots of discussion in the workshop that's based around this time map. So I really do challenge you to have a think about doing it quite diligently if you can. Hopefully we've given you enough time to find 168 hour period, and then I will promise you that the results will be more genuine and worthwhile. After you've done your map, there's an opportunity to have a bit of a look in where you did spend that time. So 168 hours available to us, maybe 50 or 60 hours sleeping, 50 or 60 hours working. You'd be surprised how many were left. There would be potentially some time spent around personal care and maybe domestics, and then also other time dedicated to things that we are either reaching our goals, hopefully, in line with our values, or potentially doing things we love. So we're going to have a really good talk about that through the workshop. That's really the other reason why we talked about values and we talked about setting goals, because we're going to hope that the 168-hour allocation of your life that you're not getting back was in line with your values and aligned with your goals. So that's about us for this session. Thank you in advance for completing the pre-course work. Yes, it'll look like a lot to start, but hopefully you find it engaging and worth the effort. If you have any dramas, definitely touch base. The thrive at tocal.com email address reaches both Heidi and I, so that's an opportunity for you to touch base. And if we're in workshops or delivering in front of people and can't take a phone call, usually we can also give a more considered response via email as well. So, yeah, by all means, welcome to pick up the phone. But if you email, we'll possibly even end up getting back to you a bit quicker with a bit more considered response. So we'll leave it at that. We'll see you at the face-to-face workshops in a couple of weeks, a few weeks for some. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks in advance for coming along and keeping in touch if there's any dramas along the way. So we'll see you all soon. Thanks.